Autoline on the Road at Cars MBS virtual event has been brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric, Innovation Electrified, with special thanks to the Center for Automotive Research.
Thanks for joining us again on Autoline's coverage of MBS 2020. I'm speaking right now with Bernard Swiecki and Carla Bailo, both from the Center for Automotive Research. Hello out there, everybody.
Hi, hello, John.
Hi, John.
Carla, let's start with you. You had an interesting session this morning all about smart cities. What were some of the highlights or most important points that were made in that discussion?
I think it's really the value of public-private partnerships came through strongly when we looked at the work being done in Peachtree Corners, setting up their Curiosity Lab, which you need to take a look at what that is and what it has done, bringing together the partners of the city as well as industry together, and government is actually funding and running the whole thing. Then we had MTA from New York City talking about how they had to pivot in the pandemic, how they managed public transit, what they anticipate having to do in the future. And then Montreal talking about their leading edge in data and data analytics and how they're trying to harness the power of that data and manage the security by having a third party actually take control of that data and analyze it, and then, let's say, spewing it back out to those who need it.
We've been hearing a lot of talk for, I don't know, a number of years now, actually, of this move to smart cities. Do you think we're actually making progress based on what you heard?
Well, I think we are in some elements. And interestingly enough, the last question I asked today was, do you think this pandemic is going to accelerate it or actually cause it to slow down? And 2 of the 3 said accelerate, because we need to have it for, to eliminate some of the inequalities that exist in cities. But then one panelist said, no, it's going to slow down because it takes money to fund these initiatives. So we'll have to see, what really happens. In mobility, being able to have a common app, common payment system, we're starting to see that becoming very endemic amongst the public transit agencies and in the cities. Some of the other things are a little bit slower, the autonomous deliveries, being able to integrate in smart infrastructure. It's a little bit slower. Again, it takes money.
Yeah, no, great point. Money talks, as they say. Bernard, let's talk a little bit about your session. You were looking at automaker, tier 1 or supplier relationships in tough times. There's always a tension between them. I got to believe that collaboration, though, is more important now during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely, John. This really is a case of never let a crisis go to waste. All the prior crises that we can think of recently, from the great global financial crisis in 2008 and 9 to the tsunami in Japan 2011, there were many lessons we learned during those experiences that made this particular crisis more handleable, even though it had so many unique elements. When we had those incidents that I mentioned before, they didn't affect everybody on the globe equally. And, they resulted in more of a slowdown than they did the complete stoppages that we had with COVID. However, it became very much clear that 1, we learned plenty of really good applicable lessons from that. 2, what we didn't experience also mattered, which is previously in tough times, I would hear that the relationships become more contentious, that when money is tighter, that people are a little bit more difficult with each other. And that really doesn't appear to have happened this time. That spirit of collaboration really seems to come through, and both of the panelists were very much positive on that experience.
I wonder if suppliers are in a better position now vis-a-vis the automakers, only because when times are good, everyone's making money. Automakers can choose from different suppliers if they need to on where to source things. Right now, I got to believe automakers are very nervous about financially distressed suppliers and need to have as good a relationship with them as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, John. That's very much the case. And I would add to that a couple of other factors as well. One, for example, in 2008 and 9, there was so much excess capacity in the industry that automakers had more places to go to with their business, and that made things a little bit more competitive. And also, don't forget that right now, we have a very contentious trade environment around the world. And that also impacts where you can source from for a given program. And these programs are often global in nature, so it becomes a very complicated chess game that you're doing. So all of those things, I think, have made that phenomenon that you just discussed that much more pronounced.
Yeah. Carla, let's go back to you. You had a couple of keynote speakers today. Let's talk about the first one. What did you learn there?
I learned a tremendous amount. It was Carla Walker-Miller from Walker-Miller Energy. Being an African-American woman in the automotive space for a fair amount of her career, but mainly she talked not so much about life in automotive and life in business, but life in general as an African-American and some of the struggles, quite frankly, that she faced and some of the preconceived biases that she faced in many, many different elements of her life, everything from getting health care when she had to go to the ER in the middle of the night, and it was assumed she came in there just for drugs because she was complaining of pain, and a number of other examples like that I think caused everybody that was sitting there to really stop and think, have I ever done this, and what should I do differently in the future? She also had very good advice for CEOs, very good advice for diversity officers and diversity departments. Stop the rhetoric and be integrated into everything and every decision that's made, and really a call to action of things that we can do and to think differently and then correspondingly provide the right actions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I watched the session this morning on sustainability, and I thought it was all going to be environmentally focused. It was amazing how much social talk was being done as part of sustainability, Black Lives Matter, diversity in the workforce, and that sort of thing. It's
ESG, and S is that societal element. And if you look at the young people coming into the business today, that societal element, what your company stands for, is one of the key reasons they're going to select to choose to work for you. So, you cannot ignore all three. And it doesn't mean just recycling and cutting carbon emissions, but it's the whole picture. What are you doing for the good of society?
That's right. Let's talk about the second keynote that you just wrapped up. All about Alexa.
Yeah, I think we all have our own stories of Alexa, right? But what is really compelling to me is the data that was shown relative to people's satisfaction with in-car systems versus cloud-based systems. And cloud-based integrated into the car is the highest level of satisfaction. Why? Because they can understand you. They have all the data in the background so that if you ask a question, typically you're going to get an answer that helps you. And they just continue to make it better. And then the connection of what's happening with home and your personal life, being able to continue to live while you're in the car. Because life doesn't stop when you set in the car and start to drive somewhere. That integration and seamlessness and almost like having a personal valet is really what we're moving to in the automotive industry. It's going to be a customer expectation world, and we definitely are moving there quickly now.
That's a good point about processing in-car information in the cloud rather than trying to process it in the car, because the cloud has so much more processing capability, so much faster than trying to put a supercomputer in every car just for data processing.
Oh, absolutely. I know in my case, I've asked for POIs, and POIs is my most frustrating thing. And one time I asked, and it was going to send me to Colorado. To Colorado, and I was asking about a carpet store in Elk Rapids, Are you kidding me? But
I like what you're
talking. There's a lot to be done for voice recognition, we'll put it that way. And they admit it as well. They still have a lot to do with dialects and persons with disabilities and other languages.
And I like the point that you're making too of, the Alexa experience in the car is different than in the home, but, they want to make that seamless between car and home and wherever.
Correct. And really working on it. Things that today you can ask Alexa at home and she'll say, well, I'll send you that information. There's got to be a way to make that better for in the car, because you obviously cannot look at that information. So how to give you enough information so you can make a choice based on the verbal answer that she can provide. So really a lot of work to do. Voice recognition is continuously the machine learning and artificial intelligence that's just going to continue to grow leaps and bounds.
Well, Bernard and Carla both, thank you for this quick synopsis of some of the sessions that took place at MBS 2020 today.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, John.
Thank you, John.
Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Our scene-aware interaction technology is capable of adjusting its output based on a spoken response from the driver. For instance, if the driver indicates that they cannot see the given landmark, the system will quickly identify alternate landmarks or improve the guidance sentence to provide a more detailed description.
Follow the silver car to turn left.
I can't see it.
Okay, follow the silver car in the leftmost lane.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of MBS 2020. I'm talking right now with Jonathan Fay from the Center for Automotive Research. Jonathan, you had a very interesting and lively discussion today all about a reality check on innovation. And what I liked is you had an automaker, Toyota, you had a supplier, Magna, and you had a Canadian startup called AutoGuardian by Smart One. But what I'm curious is about from your standpoint, as you had this panel discussion, what really stood out in your mind? What were some of the real salient points that were made?
Well, I think, when we tried to put that panel together, I think one of the key points that came out was, mobility is a little bit different than some of the other spaces where innovation occurs a lot. Like when you talk about innovation, people will often point toward biotech or consumer software or some of these other spaces. But mobility is it has some different characteristics. And one of the things that I think really came out that was that in the mobility space, it's really all about collaboration, because different people have different pieces of the puzzle, and they all have to work together to really bring a solution to market. It can't just be an automaker, it can't just be a supplier, it can't just be the startup. They actually have to all work together to bring these solutions to market. And the different panelists all had different examples of that. Gotcha.
And tell us a little bit about this Canadian startup, because I was not familiar with that company.
Yeah, it's interesting. Teal Houston there is the CEO, and it's AutoGuardian by SmartCone. And what it is SmartCone was the parent company that had this ability to stick sensors and radios on a cone. And they had like a zillion different applications for it. But they really then wanted to commercialize it for the pedestrian safety market in the company AutoGuardian. And they're starting with like bicycle safety and pedestrian safety. What's cool though is that's just the tip of the iceberg for them. What they want to do then is they're going to collect data on pedestrian and vehicle interactions, and then suddenly becomes a data play for when autonomous vehicles come online. And the autonomous vehicles can use that data to plan ahead or to help with them in understanding, okay, there are 3 pedestrians and here they are, to give them advanced warning. So there's a lot of once that infrastructure is in place, with the pedestrian safety application, then they can do a lot of other things with it in the autonomous vehicle space. And I thought that was very clever that they did that.
Yeah. And then you had Boris Shulkin from Magna. What I thought was interesting is he said, the auto industry has looked at the tech industry, clearly as a source of innovation and ideas. But he was even talking about the medical sector.
Yeah. Yeah.
And surgery and that. Why don't you pick it up from there?
Well, that's really actually it came out in terms of Fred Mao and also Boris, right? So Boris is on the technology he's looking for technologies to integrate into Magna's things. And then Fred's on the other side of Toyota. He's looking to place technologies that Toyota's developed in other companies. And what's really interesting is we're really seeing this blend across different industries. Like, the new paint that Toyota's developing has applications in other industries. And Boris is picking up, maybe fiber optic technology that's used in some of this interventional pulmonology space. They really miniaturized the cameras and the fiber optics and amazing stuff they're doing over there. And he's pulling it into Magna's products. So it's really interesting that they're really taking this pan-industry look at new technologies and saying, hey, I can use that, and trying to match it up against their applications. And the technology is going both ways.
Yeah, and talk a little bit more about what Toyota's doing, because I found that fascinating. They're actually trying to monetize a lot of their intellectual property that's probably just sitting on a shelf or in a hard drive.
Right, and what's really funny about that is, as Fred was talking about it, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Bell Labs. Right? Bell Labs a long time ago, yes, they were in the telecommunications business. And so they were creating technologies that all had a bent toward telecommunications, but they ended up inventing all kinds of things that revolutionized everything from the transistor to the laser. I mean, that was an amazing time. And Toyota's kind of doing the same thing, right? With LiDARs and the new semiconductor stuff they're doing and all kinds of different things that they're inventing as a part of the autonomous vehicle effort. Well, quite frankly, they're going to revolutionize a lot of different industries.
I'm surprised that Toyota seems to be a little bit late to the party in doing this, because companies, especially like Ford, even General Motors, have been doing this for years, and they'll never tell you how much money they make on it, but they smile and just say it's a pretty nice business.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that it's often one of those processes. It takes a lot of effort to find that match. And so I think when you're operating at the scale of a GM or Ford or Toyota, one of the hardest parts is finding the match of what application for the technology should go into. And so when you get to that scale, you have enough stuff that people will actually look through your things, right? Like we actually find this at universities, right? So if you look at tech transfer across the US, MIT and Stanford, actually they're arguably the most successful at tech transfer. It's because they have enough stuff that people are just literally digging through their files. Michigan, we're pretty good. There's a few people looking at our stuff, but we're not quite at the level of those other people. If you're Toyota, it's worth your time to kind of look through their patent portfolio and see what they got.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Michigan, because when I introduced you, I said you're with the Center for Automotive Research. You're actually with the University of Michigan. You're one of the chair sessions for the Center for Automotive Research's management briefing seminars.
That's right. That's right. I always laugh because CAR used to be part of the University of Michigan a long time ago. And then it was
called OSAT then, the Office for the Study of Automotive Transportation.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, Jonathan, thanks so much for your time today. Very interesting. It was a great panel. I love the energy that you bring to it.
Great. Thanks, John. No, we had a lot of fun, and hopefully people took some takeaways.
Yeah, well, good. Right. Thanks for your time again.
All right. Thanks, John.